see people.
Recording in progress.
Welcome everyone to the December event of the Historic Preservation Commission. I have just a couple of announcements. Last month I paid a little bit of a verbal tribute to Ted Becker, who had passed away. And this month, I'm going to do the same thing for Bonnie Osler. She was on city council for a long time. Before that, she was very involved in the city. And she was the ex officio for HPARC after Ted became mayor. And so, she was very supportive. And it was, during, and she really, as all of you know, or a lot of you know, trying to sometimes get things changed seems like a huge mountain to climb. But so we were trying to upgrade and update the guidelines, as we're trying to do again. And several of the commissioners were very concerned because we had a loosey-goosey materials, and they and maybe you probably wish it was still like that, but and so several commissioners said, we should be really talking about natural materials, and which was of course wood. And she went to the mat with the current mayor and council, none of which are on council now, and was able to get the front elevation of all contributing structures to be natural materials. Even that took a lot of doing, and I kept saying, well, what about the sides? We see the sides. She said, just be thankful, Barbara, you got the front, So anyway, she was a good counselor, and she was a very good supporter of HPARC, HPC, and then HPARC, and she also was one of the two city council people that worked on bringing HPC and CARC together as HPARC, as a single entity, which was a bit of an undertaking. So, I'm sorry she's gone, but I'm glad to have known her. Minutes. We have no minutes. Oh wait, I had one other thing too. While we're talking about announcements, sort of. Okay, this is the city belongs to NAPC, which is the National Alliance of Preservation Commissioners, and I hope everyone who's you should have received this too, John. Mm-hmm. And so we have webinars about once a month, give or take. And the one that's coming up should be really good. It's navigating ADU development in historic districts. And that's something I know the city has been dealing with and looking at guidelines and specifications for. So it's going to be I should be very good. So I just want to make sure everybody got theirs and signed up. Thursday, yes. So good, okay. That's the rest of the announcements. So our one and only application is discussion and possible action regarding H25-24 on behalf of Richter Associates to allow removal of rotting cedar siding and replacement with fiber cement board non-contributing. The property is located at 701 Savannah Road, Sussex County Tax Map 335-8.11-171.00 and 335-8.11-171.03, 701 Savannah Road. If whoever's going to present, if you would, and we've got a whole table for you this time. You can spread out. You don't have to stand up and share a microphone.
If you start by telling us your name and your address.
My name is Dr. Andrea Richter Pettigo, and I live at 69 Pine Reach in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware.
And you're the
Thank you.
property manager, correct?
Well, I'm a partner in Richter Associates, and
Okay.
I'm also the property manager.
Okay.
My name is Jacob, my company is J Skills, and I live in Milton.
Okay, very good. All right, bring us up to date on the revision.
Last time we came in, we tried to, see if we were able to do the cedar impressions. It's not the right product, so I consulted, and what we came up with was the hardy plank is, we see a lot of that, and so that's why we're here.
Okay.
I do have a sample of that if you want to see that.
Oh, yes, please, yes.
Okay, so it's the plank.
So you're doing as plank siding,
Yep.
correct?
The lap side.
It's a lap
Lap
siding.
siding.
Okay.
This thing weighs a ton.
Yeah, it does weigh a lot.
That's heavy, it's heavy.
There was an inquiry when we were here last time about the history of the building. So I did do some digging to find out about the history. It was originally owned by the Moore family, who, you know, were very related to BB Medical Center. And they was original purposed as a car dealership. And then it was purchased by Bryce Lingo after that. And then the Richter family, which I'm a part of, purchased it in 1992. So Bryce did the re-siding on the building when he was in ownership of it. And it was a different type of cedar installment where there was 8x8 panels that the cedar was put on the wood panels. And then those panels were adhered to the building. So it's not a single shake application that's on the building now.
So what are you gonna do? You have to take off the whole panel?
Yeah, you would have to remove all of those panels, and then we'd have to, you know, rewrap the building because we want it to be sealed. And then we would apply this, you know, engineered fiber cement onto the building, all the way around.
Have you worked with that material before?
Yeah, we do tons of it.
Oh, that's good, because
Yeah, we do a lot.
I was refreshing myself on reading about it, and, you know, of course, it has dust and things like that, so you have to,
Yeah.
careful.
Yeah, there's guidelines for it, but
good, good,
we've done, I mean, I don't know, probably 100 houses with it, so,
okay,
yeah, it lasts a long time.
okay. And the color is, did you pick a
The
color?
color scheme is gonna be the same as existing. So when it's initially put up, it'll have a prime paint on it, but it will have to be painted again after it's fully installed. So-
Okay.
But we won't be changing the color scheme.
Okay, that's because you don't want to change it.
No, I think it looks good. The
Okay.
color.
That's fine, that's fine.
And we all know the building that color, so.
What's that?
We all know the
Building,
building that color.
Yeah.
We've seen
Yeah.
it for decades.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, all
And
right.
the surface is gonna be smooth of the hardy board?
I think, I mean,
It's gonna be a little texture.
there's like the grain pattern, which looks like natural cedar, if that's, you know,
Yeah,
it's available in this style or smooth,
Or smooth?
but like, I think
We're gonna get this textured.
that you can't tell when, it's hard to tell if you're not up on it, like you don't know if it's cedar or hardy.
right, right.
You know, you have to like really look.
Yeah, you know, we have, in our guidelines, we talk about smooth side, but in this particular case, it's such a large expanse of wall and everything, I think it's gonna actually look better for it
Yeah,
to be
this-
textured, and it's not contributing.
It's not a contributing
Yeah,
structure, so
so,
that's,
yeah.
that's fine.
The
It's just you had
smooth-
or there, so I
smooth
wasn't
shows
quite
more.
sure which one you were interested in using in your application where you said cedar mill or smooth, so I assumed you were trying to make a decision between them,
Yep.
but.
And then your, the end, the trim is all gonna be white, I guess?
The
Yeah,
white.
it'll be white composite, and it'll all
work
just
together.
like you see here.
Yeah, okay, that's a sample of the white composite.
Yeah, just to show you.
Mm-hmm,
I mean, they imitate natural,
mm-hmm,
so just an upgraded version.
okay.
I mean, the goal of the product is to mimic wood,
Mm-hmm,
but it's engineered to stand up beautifully with all, you know, the climate changes that we experience
Mhm.
here, the spectrums.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was reading about that also, and then, yeah, it's considered one of the stable products,
Yeah.
recommended stable
Yeah,
products.
when they first came out, they had problems, but that was like 20 years ago, and they redid everything, and now it's
They sort
great.
of re-engineered it. Yeah, I think still has some problems, like, people don't want to run it down near
The
if there's
ground.
landscaping, you know, you
Yeah,
have
we
to keep
usually
it,
put a water table board on there
Okay.
and flashing underneath, so
Okay.
like, it'll never touch the ground.
yeah, because that's.
And that's not really relevant. is it?
Yeah, that's just
Well,
not,
no,
right.
I
Is it
asked,
'cause
I
it goes
asked.
to
She asked
I
about
asked
that.
about
Oh,
That's okay.
oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
I think it's relevant, answering my question. Yeah, no, I think that is important, because it, you know, it has, other people have had those problems, and that everybody now knows about.
It's definitely top line.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Larry?
No.
I just want to be clear, so I understand, the material for the trim is the same material as the lap site.
So the material for the trim, what we typically use it's a PVC. It's not a vinyl, but it's a, you know, I think they call it molecular PVC. It's like compressed, but it goes hand in hand. You know what I mean?
Is it
There's-
compatible?
They used to have the hardy trim when they first started. It was made out of concrete. But when you join the pieces together, there's really no way to make it like, to make it seal properly, so they were having problems, so they don't make the hardy trim no more.
And the trim that has been put on the building at various times for repairs is composite material
Yeah.
already. It's not wood.
Right,
Okay, thank you for that, I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
no problem.
Two of the most vocal people having to share. Never good.
Give you this one.
But just to clarify, it is not like an AZEC. It is a composite. It appears to be more like a wood trim.
Well, it's a PVC, so would be considered like an AZAC, you know what I mean? But it's the right application for it. I mean, you wouldn't
Yeah,
want,
I understand that.
the problem
Yes.
with when you put the wood, because this all gets backcombed.
Yeah, certainly, if we're permitting wood, if we're permitting hardy on the rest of it, it would make no sense to put a
It's gonna look
wood
beautiful.
trim on it.
Oh, you can keep it, I'll use this.
Any other questions? from
No,
anybody?
Madam Chair, I'll move. I find that the application is complete. Great photos and materials for us to be able to have seen before we came here tonight. The property is in a historic district. It's a non-contributing structure. And the materials then are appropriate for what's going to be done here to do the change of taking off the old cedar that's been up there and using the hardy board cement on it. So I propose that this will not change the streetscape significantly. It will fit in nicely with the historic district. And I move that we approve the application as submitted.
Okay, you have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Larry. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
We know
So is it aye or nay if opposed? Nay. Nay.
Yeah, if you're opposed, nay.
You're opposed.
Yes.
And,
And my rationale is, as I said, I think that the material in the sample is appropriate for a non-contributing structure in the historic district.
So,
okay, so we're gonna go around, and everybody is going to say how they,
Larry, you seconded? I just gave my reasons.
yes, you just gave your reasons. Larry?
I concur.
Okay.
I think it's appropriate for what we're dealing with. It's fine.
Okay.
This is a hard one. It gave me pause, again, for all the reasons you've heard for the last couple of meetings. But I do believe you have done your due diligence. I commend you for the research on the building. I commend you for the research on finding, products that you feel that you can work with us. And I just feel like under the circumstances, this is certainly a better solution, the PVC solution, and that because it's a non-contributing structure, we're headed certainly in the right direction, and we will not have to have this discussion for a long time. Thank you.
We won't be here.
No, we will not.
Okay, Deborah?
Okay, well, I do think for your building, this is an appropriate choice. I just would like to go on record that because you are particularly a corner property with 2 front yards, that I am uncomfortable saying yes to hardy board, and that I want to put it in the record that this is an exception for an exceptional building, not typical of Lewis vernacular, not typical of Lewis downtown. But I would still prefer to see wood on any street-facing surface in the historic district. That is the rationale for my nay vote.
Okay. All right, I vote a yes vote for this. I think you've done an excellent job of researching materials. I think it's people may think this is a simple project, but I don't. You explained it very well. It's obviously not just a simple resurfacing. A lot of kind of maintenance has to be done to it so the building is there for another 40 years, I guess, the length of the material. And I think you've done an excellent job of researching it and staying within the guidelines, because it's a non-contributing structure, and and even though it's very visible, I think you're doing a very good job, and it'll be a nice contribution. So, okay, so at this point, you will be able to get your building permit. John.
Or John.
They will, yes,
Shepherd you through the process.
yes, so,
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you. Between the two of us, we're going to be committed to doing a very good job, and we're going to make Lewis proud of how that building looks.
Good.
I think it'll be a big improvement over
Yes.
how it's gotten.
yes,
So-
it's struggling right now,
It is.
yes.
So we plan on making it look beautiful because we care about Lewis.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
John, yes, yes.
So for my drawing, downtown. Okay, just like normal, right?
Yeah.
All right, thank you, guys.
Okay. So I'm just going to go through a couple of things because we have extra time. I know you were hoping to go right home. No.
But we won't draw it out.
No, we won't. Why? You have a TV show?
Oh, we forgot to ask if there was anybody online
Oh, is there anybody online, Blue?
that wanted to comment.
No? No? And none of the commissioners are online either? No, okay. All right. So, we have our little unfinished business list, which I carried over incomplete. The Historic District Resurvey, and so the phase that we're in right now is the first phase of updating the federal
National
thank you,
Register.
the National Register. And Janelle sat in on a telephone meeting that we had with Chad, and I think Kate, and it was, one other woman was there as well, who's doing a lot of the work.
And that's the Center for
Center for
Historic.
Historic
Architectural
Architectural
Design.
Design in the University of Delaware, and that's who the city has retained to do all the updates on all the resurveying updates, because they're the qualified entity that is approved and works very well with SHPO, and SHPO is the one of the funding agents. City of Lewis is the other one. But, and we play nice with both. We work they're very helpful. They're anytime, we have questions. I know Janelle's called them, and I call them sometimes more often. Maybe they want to hear from me, but, they have such a wealth of knowledge and access to things. And I also asked Michael Wider to review, because we received a draft, and he reviewed it because that kind of thing's right up his alley. And so he was part of that meeting as well. And he had some questions, and so they have just a few little loose ends to take care of, and then we're gonna set up a time in January. And I want to, it doesn't, in fact, I don't think it should be part of a meeting. I think it should be a separate meeting, because they will perhaps offer to come down as long as it's during their working hours. Unless we want to pay them extra, they'll come down anytime we want. But I just think, I don't like to, I think it's nice to be courteous and try and work around their schedule as well, because they're pretty busy. So my thinking, and I'm open for any input, I can't see anybody, is that, this would be, I have to find out when they're going to be available, maybe the end of January, 1st of February, something like that, and the city schedule, and it'll be open to the public, of course, and they'll do a presentation on what they're working on, and it's a 2-year project. So we'll get funding from the city for next year, and we'll get some more funding next year from the SHPO office as well. And we may get additional funding from SHPO. We usually get a few thousand here and there. Because the reason we're always ready, and we always have projects ready. And a lot of times, all of the CLGs, which is Lewis has, we have a ordinance, we have review process, and some of the other communities that also qualify for funding frequently aren't ready. They don't have a project ready. So we get some of those little pots of money, which are helpful. So I think takes care of that. The user-friendly guideline, do you want to?
Sure.
You want to talk about that? And maybe Deb, at some point, I'll let you piggyback with him on some of your thoughts.
Can I ask a question about the last part? Will that just be Chad, or will that be Chad and SHPO
I don't know.
coming down?
I don't know.
So we'll schedule a daytime meeting for that.
Yeah, right.
That's open to the
Yes,
public?
yes.
Okay.
The SHPO area, I want to get them down. I've talked to them about coming down also. And we'll just have to figure out whether it's going to work better for everyone to have 2 separate, times, or not. And part of SHPO will also be a presentation on tax credits, which I think will be very useful. And since everything we do is filmed and recorded, that event should be very helpful to other homeowners who may not be able to attend.
It seems to me it would be great if we could make that all in one and get some notification sent out in the historic district, or do some press release, somehow
It
get.
depends. It just depends.
I think it depends on how you want this to function and what you're looking for. Because I know on the call, they typically say, I know you were going to give an update to mayor and council at hopefully their January workshop as to where we are in the project. And then the big outreach, I think they said, comes a little bit later on because they're still very early in phase 1. But yeah, absolutely. That was one of my questions. It's like, when do we go out to public, and when we let people know, and when do we get, and they were like, we're still working very early, so it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Because I do think the possibility of money for renovations, getting, the credits that people can get.
That's a tax
That is, yes, but that is something I think that really incentivizes.
Yeah, but I don't think one has anything to do with the other. They're
No.
unrelated.
No, but I'm saying
I
that
think people that are
it's
interested,
an incentive for the
Pe-
topic, to bring people in.
people that are interested in tax credit information, I don't think necessarily will be interested in updating the National
National
Register.
Register.
Yeah, I think it's a different audience. You know, sometimes, you know, if either entity comes down, they're not gonna be on a tight time schedule. So if we run over, you know, a planned hour because it's really beneficial to all of us, I don't wanna cut them short because we've got somebody else standing in the wings.
Right.
I mean, if we were gonna do some big preservation thing, which this isn't, then of course we could schedule that on a Saturday or sometime. But that's not what this is. This is just education for the commissioners. So that's that update. And I've already touched on the National Register.
All
One
right,
thing,
so I'll talk about the user-friendly.
oh, that's right, I'm sorry.
So one of the projects I decided to undertake earlier when, shortly after joining the commission, was, we'd found from everybody here who's got a history is that this user guide, which used to be handed out, was out of, it was incorrect, it had incorrect
was-
information, it was
it needs
outdated,
updating.
it
It
needs
needs to be
updating. There are things in here that don't need to be here, and then there are things that certainly are not there. But what I've heard from the public and I've heard from applicants at times is that things are a bit ambiguous. There's not examples to help us understand concepts. And probably even more fundamental, that the Secretary of the Interior's standards that we base our decisions on are not well understood. So I decided to undertake this project where we're gonna make a new user-friendly guide. I can envision it in two different ways after looking at lots of examples from a lot of other cities, is that almost everyone now that's functioning fairly well has a website that is really easy to get through, can answer your most commonly answered questions, give you maps and do other things. Hyperlinks, if you're gonna do Windows, it takes you right to Windows, right? But they also have a companion PDF format that people can download to their computer, and then in the search box, they can put in Windows, or they can put in standards, or put in whatever it is that they're looking for, if it's gutters, if it's mechanical material, whatever. And so I've been working at that slowly. It's about 40 pages long at this point because there's a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm rearranging it just as a draft so you can all see. So I brought maybe 4 pages or 5 pages today of the PDF type of format that I'm working on, because wording takes a long time to get it just right, to make sure it's Lewis specific. You can scroll through a little bit there, blue for me if you would. So it just begins a little bit with just an introduction to what this all is. There'd be a table of contents that people could hyperlink to any part of the document that they want. But it would start out with, why do you even have guidelines? What is this all about? And it's in a not conversational tone exactly, but it's not legalese. It's actually fairly easy to read. It ties Lewis history into why there are guidelines. But it has to do all the things that an applicant needs, which is my house in the historic district? Do I have a contributing structure or not? And I have a project. Is this eligible for an HPARC review or not? And so if you can stop there for a moment, one of the things I found really useful in the way some cities approach it is they talk about some of the common styles of architecture that they have in their city. And I think that's a really wise idea. One thing I've gotten by listening to applicants over these months is when we talk about windows, they just think it's a window. Window's a window.
Yeah.
They don't realize windows have many different aspects to them. And a window from colonial times is very different than a window from the 1850s, the Italianate style, or the Greek Revival windows, or something like that. So it's to give examples and talk just very briefly about the different types of, not all of them, but Greek Revival and colonial and Queen Anne style, some of the things that we have around town, so that people can begin to think, oh, what kind of house do I have? And when they go to, is my house a contributing structure, and they go to the survey, and they see their house on the page, it tells them, you have a Romanesque, Greek Revival, or whatever it is, type of house. And so they can then start to say, oh, what does that mean? Oh, my windows are bigger than colonial windows, and I have a 2/2, or I have a 4/4, and what does that mean?
Right.
So the idea is to put enough of that in there without giving them so much information they get overwhelmed. And I'll give you an example. I won't mention the city, but there's a city that puts in a piece on windows that is 11 pages long. It tells you about the caulking in windows and no, I'm sorry, that's too much. It's not our job to educate the public about every aspect of a window or a door or a cornice or something like that. But this is an example of the kinds of graphics that help people understand. This one particular, this little graphic, is showing you that if you're going to rebuild a porch where somebody had removed it, and you can see down the street that there's a porch, you should build a porch that looks like those other porches, the same proportions and the scale, and not something that is too big or too small or too grand. It should fit into the streetscape. So start to give people an idea of what do we mean by scale, proportion, massing, and those kinds of things. You go a little bit further down. Examples of, structures that are too big for a spot or have the wrong form for a spot in a historic neighborhood, and what would be compatible with the neighbors and what would be incompatible with the neighboring area or the streetscape itself. So one benefit of...
That was a great example.
Yeah, if you can go back a little bit, I'll show you that example there.
Yeah.
So this is somebody who has a historic house on the left, and things fit. The windows fit, the porch is correct, the height from the ground is correct. Then you move to the right, which is an incompatible type of addition. And to explain, why is this incompatible? Well, look, you've changed the windows. You've put in modern windows. You don't have the same step up onto a porch. You've closed it in, which just ruins the historic nature of that house. So one of the benefits of getting these from all these other cities is almost all of them have been funded by SHPO, by their state historic board. And so what they say is, you are free to use any of these graphics, please. We developed them, but anybody can use them because it was all federal money used eventually to make this stuff. If you want to go on a little bit more, and I have brought a couple, but here's windows, for example. So what I think might be good, and I'm going to ask the expertise of other people on this commission as we go along, is to show people that it's not just a window. There are parts to a window. There's numbers of panes. There's proportions. There's and this one shows the colonial window and the top on the right, and then the Italianate tall, thin windows you'd have, or the bungalow windows that you might have, and how the panes vary, whether it's 6/6 or 3/1, or and then some basic recommendations for when you're going to be doing something with your windows. And this is an example of where I think it's really helpful to say the Secretary of the Interior Standard number 2 says this. This is how it applies to windows. Standard number 4 says this. Standard number 9 says this. So we would show with each of these things that this is following the it's interpreting the standards that the Secretary of the Interior has provided. And I don't know if I have anything off to the, well, more definitions. Oh, and this is, something I started doing that I think is very helpful, which is when you're looking to renovate or do an addition or, well, renovations, additions are a lot of what we do, but there would be recommended things to do or things to avoid. So some of the most common things that people have. So this PDF would be very easy for people on their own computer to go searching through, find whatever it is they're looking for, go back to something easily, or they could bookmark for that matter. But the website would be aligned with it, so that this is consistent. The benefit of that compared to this is if you're gonna change this, you have to then reprint the whole thing and try to get rid of the old
Yes.
copies. Whereas this one could be updated as necessary and very easily switch out the PDF that you put up on the website and say there's a new updated 2025 PDF. But the idea is to demystify. I think I did put more examples of mistakes people make with shutters, for example. And then, did I put the, well, that's us. That just tells them a little bit about HPARC, core values of the city, the standards for rehabilitation there, and then the glossary. And the glossary right now looks very much like our glossary looks like in the code. The benefit of that is that if they actually want to know what the definition is, they can go there. But in the text, it gives them a little bit more context about what that is. And then I don't know if I put at the very end in this little PDF, I was throwing maybe I didn't put it there. I have a flow chart, which says, I have a proposal, I want to do some work. Does it at all impact the exterior of the structure and property? No, then you don't need to come to HPARC. Yes, it does. Okay, then you go over to here. Does it go to chair and staff? And then there's a asterisk to say here is the qualifications that would allow it to go to chair and staff. Or no, it needs to go to the whole HPARC. And then what happens if chair and staff says, no, that's not good? Well, you can resubmit and come back. So it shows them the whole process through down to their finish. But in just one simple flow chart so that they can very simply see where they go from step to step. So I'm in what I call the very rough construction stage, whereas I'm trying to put all the pieces together for all the things that we consider. And there are a couple things that need to be added that we don't have. And then this commission will decide, do we want that stuff in there? Any new stuff? And if so, how should it be worded? But I want to make sure we're at least addressing it. I'll give you an example. Right now, I don't think we have anything that says in the historic district what you do with mechanicals, other than, building department may have something, but not putting your mechanicals right out in the street where it's a historic district. You should have it maybe off behind a fencing or some kind of screening or in the back of the building. There's a building in town that has a staircase that comes right down, almost to the front of the house that looks so out of place. Well, we have nothing that says, if you're gonna do staircases, perhaps they should be in the back of the building. We recommend that they be not visible. So those kinds of things. So it's a process and it's a lot of material.
You've done a great job, though.
But no decisions are being made. I'm just simply putting stuff together. And then what I'd like to do is get some input from other commissioners on design, what more needs to be there, what needs to be taken out. And to get some one thing I like about this is the nice photos of the buildings that we have in town.
You're welcome.
Are great examples. And I want to get some more of those photographs so that we have, and perhaps some up-close ones on details that we really want the applicants to think about. But the idea is to be easy to read and informative, as well as giving them compatible, incompatible, this is recommended, this is not recommended, and why? What's the standard that says that?
I think it's extremely valuable. That's why we did that and updated
Yeah.
it for a couple of years, but, called it a user.
Microphone.
Oh, sorry. I said, that's, I think it's really important. replacing the user-friendly guide that we had for about 10 years, but bringing it up to date. So all the material that you've put in there is from the code?
From the code right now, so I'm pulling it all into the spots where it
So-
should be.
Right, okay.
So if I understand the process correctly, once we all decide that this is what we like, then it would go to city commission and the mayor and the city council to adopt that.
Correct. And so this, Janelle, would this be a time that we could also, you know, when it goes to mayor and council, have some like, in bold type or red or something, things that we want to add to the code at this
So-
time?
This is what you would add to the code. So what,
Because this is exactly what the code is now, currently.
yes, so like, again, if HVAC is missing, and I know, I think you were looking at maybe additions and having their own section, and
Yeah.
new construction having their
Right.
own section, that this actually becomes your code.
Right, it
Yes.
does. And the formatting is so much easier for us.
Yes, and the public to
And
understand.
the public.
So, because I found a couple of examples, like City of Dover, their guidelines are not in their code, it's a booklet. So we would go, okay, it's as, the guidelines as adopted by mayor and council as of this date, and there are those guidelines.
Okay,
So some of the stuff in the code would stay, some of it would go away, turned into this much more user-friendly standards and
Format, yeah.
guidelines.
Perfect.
And then when it I'm sorry. Go.
No, mine was just that I just wanted to compliment you on a huge undertaking, and yet you made it look pretty relatively simple, and it
Yeah.
looks very modern and well organized and just visually appealing and accessible. And that's what this lacks, is accessibility.
And to be fair, about a third of the other cities that I look at, they're just awful. Their text from page 1 to page 49, and you'd be bored to tears, but you'd have no idea what they're talking about. And that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to give examples, but at the same time, educate people. So part of the introduction, for example, of why do you have an HPARC? Why do you have a historic district? What are the benefits to a city of having a historic district? Right? Well, the city's already identified some of them, which is why they established a historic district. But they're very well known around the country, you know, the economic benefits, the quality of life, the et cetera. To make it just so accessible to people and pleasant, because if it doesn't have pictures and it doesn't have things that help explain,
And,
it's
yeah,
not-
examples.
It's not really gonna be a very useful thing.
John, how much time do you have in this so far?
Oh, I think
A lot
maybe
of
you're gonna,
hours.
maybe you're gonna get
A lot.
paid. Maybe you're gonna get paid.
No, I was just
oh.
curious because it's really neat. I know you borrowed some of the stuff or they let you use it, but it's really impressive.
Yes,
The one thing that comes up a lot frequently, and I don't know if it's in there or not, and I don't even know if it's worth broaching, is the whole notion of color.
it's in there.
I was thinking that
It's
too.
in there.
I didn't see it. It is,
Oh,
in-
there,
it's
you didn't see
currently-
much. I only took a few pages
It's
out of
it's
what
in
I'm
the
working
It's in the
on.
code, but it doesn't,
Doesn't have much teeth to it.
no, it doesn't. All it says is, it gives us, the ability to review colors and ask for finishes and colors, so that we can review colors and
As part of
finishes
an application.
as part of an application, but, you know, after the project's finished, the city doesn't have any way to review or maintain or anything.
So
I do think that one thing, that does make it much easier is that you've made it easy for people to identify what type of home they have. And not everyone does know what type of home they have. So if they know they have a Greek revival, it's very simple now to go Google, historic colors for Greek revivals, where it just, I think that
Well,
it
and that's
was,
part of the point of doing that is, I don't think people realize you shouldn't be putting Victorian painted lady colors on a colonial house.
right.
But they don't know that.
But it's also also understanding, it's like, okay, I might have a very grandiose lots of details on my neighbor's house, but it might still be a Victorian house, but mine has less. I should not put all of what my neighbor has on my house, because that's not true to the house. So yeah, it's an education, but it's also setting, this is appropriate, this is not appropriate, and, and the reasoning why.
Yeah, and that's a really good comment you made, Janelle, because that follows the Secretary of Interior's. If a house never had a porch, it shouldn't have a porch. Now, we've made concessions sometimes when it made sense, but and being true to the house is just that. You're supposed to research your own house, and if you can find data that says it had a porch, great, an old photograph, whatever. Or the neighbors down the street said it always had a porch until that last guy that tore it off, So it's, I think that never appears anywhere. And I think that fact that and that's straight from the Secretary of Interior's, and I think that's really, really good information, because that's sort of where you start. Know your house and be true to your house.
So I'm finding the survey to be very, very helpful, because I keep going back to individual pages of individual houses so that I can tie into the wording.
Right.
That's the information you need to help you make decisions. And one of the things, a funny thing that came along was Delaware vernacular.
Yeah.
I was
anybody
waiting
actually
for it.
describe
I was
that?
looking for it.
Well, I can tell you that this is the one time that I've used the library considerably and AI,
Wow. Oh.
and found all kinds of resources that tell us what Delaware vernacular architecture is and why it is. Why did it happen? How did it function? And it has to do with resources and local talent and carpentry and all the other kinds of things. But we have a lot of houses in town that essentially are described as vernacular.
Oh, they are.
And
Yes.
they're
And
either front
everybody-
gabled or side gabled, and they've got L's, and they've got other pieces on
Yeah,
them.
and
So I want people to understand what that means.
it's actually valid.
I know there's a great history of the shipbuilders
Mhm.
building houses. My son's house was framed by the shipbuilders. And so did that have anything to do with the shipbuilding trades and?
Oh, yeah, but-
Everything in the town
Historic
here
yeah.
was affected by the shipbuilders and
And
the
the
trading.
pilots, and the
And the
pilots,
pilots going
yeah.
back and forth.
Because
Certainly,
all-
Pilot Town Road's a great example.
Yeah, I mean, most of those houses on Pilot Town Road, the big houses,
And the houses with the widow walks
With
is,
it, yeah.
is a
with the little lookouts
clear
where they could
design pattern
look
that
out to
came
the
from
bay and see if the
the
ship's
maritime
coming in.
history.
Yeah.
So part of the introduction and the, what I call history of Lewis, describes that not only fishing, but trading and shipbuilding and the railroad coming through all had an impact. And in trying to, because I want the person who's reading it to say, oh, so there's so many different kinds of designs in town because there were different eras. There were different resources available. Some people were rich, some people were not so rich. Sometimes the materials just weren't available. As we talked about in a previous meeting, Pennsylvania Bluestone. Well, that was very accessible here. Brick
But
was
not-
very accessible
But the Bluestone
But-
wasn't until the
until a certain
railroads-
time.
Until the railroads
Right.
came in.
And that's the point, is it's all got to do with history and what would be appropriate. Reading about why so many of the houses in town are up a little bit off the street the way they are. There's actually history written about the areas that used to flood. And so people wanted their houses up that little bit higher so that they weren't going to be flooding inside their houses. So now, not everything goes in there. I mean, there are some cities that go on for 127 pages, and that's not the point here. But I think what would make this easy, both in PDF style and when it gets adapted by Blue and the other fabulous experts over there, for the web, is that you can click on what you want. You don't have to go
And read the
through,
whole thing,
read
yeah.
the whole thing. You don't have to read legalese, sorry, but legalese is just not even my thing. It should be fairly straight to the point. and not trying to explain everything, but to give enough information that people can say, oh, I think I understand what I'm working with my house.
Yeah, like what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, more or less is what's allowed, what's not allowed. Because if it's inappropriate, it's not gonna be allowed.
And tying it to the Secretary of the Interior's standards. Because I really want people to understand that, well, yes, we make subjective decisions up here, of course, we're human beings, of course we do. They're educated, subjective decisions. In other words, we're interpreting those standards for how they apply to Lewis and its historic district, and why maintaining the historic district is a good goal for the city, for the residents, quality of life, good economics, tourist trade, all the other things that it brings to us.
You know what I was wondering about is the method, instead of saying, I mean, we may need to say what's allowed or permitted or not permitted or allowed, but the Secretary of Interior doesn't say that. They say recommended and not recommended. And,
Or compatible and incompatible.
but they say recommended and not recommended.
Most of the
Yes,
time, yeah.
but if this is gonna be adopted, I think you're gonna need something a little bit stronger than recommended and not recommended, because I think, if it's gonna become a code
Yeah,
in the tools you use, I think it's
Okay.
gonna be something a little bit stronger than recommended
All
and
right, well,
not
that'll be
recommended.
something
Yeah.
that then
Shall.
we come to.
The
It's
shall
like
word
appropriate and
is
inappropriate, which is
huge.
something you were, or compatible and
Yeah.
not compatible, which is what was used, yeah. We just need to make sure the wording is the same.
And
the
some
whole way
things are
through, yeah.
definitely not, just absolutely not acceptable.
yeah. Alex, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, no, that's correct, what Janelle said, and I would just add to that, there should be some flexibility in the code for what happens in each individual application, because every property is a little bit different.
Yes.
That's right.
So standards will be applied uniformly, but, there's different facts in each case.
Yeah,
so.
and that's why I think the Secretary of Interior's works so well, because they know they're addressing the whole United States, and every area is just can be significantly different. And so that's why they do recommended and not recommended. So maybe we'll have to go through and decide when that's applicable, when it's not. I did
Well, there's already 3 spots I've written, every property is unique. Every structure is unique.
Yeah.
So just because, oh, they did that over there on such and such
Right.
an avenue, does not mean you can do it here. That
Yeah.
there are different things. So I think that
And the
flexibility is
streetscapes are
important.
unique as well, for the scale and the massing and
Yes,
all of that.
and, well,
Yeah.
different parts of town,
Yeah.
too.
And we
Yes.
would have a very different section for the additions, renovations, the demolition and floodplain
Construction, yeah.
and new construction. So it's easy for people to see what those recommendations are in that area, how they apply the standards.
Well, you're doing a phenomenal job.
So,
And I would also like to say that sometimes you do work like this, and you never know, you can get an even broader impact than you initially planned, because I think with a very accessible website, that, you know, people who are renovating older homes in adjacent neighborhoods could have aspirations where they say, well, you know, my house is kind of colonial, and there it is, and you could choose to put colonial windows on a colonial house that's in Pilot Town, but something that could have greater benefit for the entire city and area. I really
Well,
do, I
in
do
the
see
historic
this.
district as well. I mean, I'll
Well,
use
'cause
my
that's, of
house
course,
as
the
an
historic
example. We
district.
bought it 29 years ago, and it's a 1720, circa 1720 colonial. But the previous owner put a fiberglass porch on the front of it, a very small little porch. And so the first thing that came down, the first 2 weeks, was taking that porch off, because it didn't belong on a colonial house, and certainly not those materials. So I would hope that some people around town might say, my house might look better if I took it back to what it originally used to look like, or at least to some
Aspire
extent,
to, just
aspire to do
aspiring
that.
to it.
Yeah, which I think would be a great idea.
And we've had a lot of applicants that have done that,
Mm-hmm.
that have really been, they've done research on their houses or structures.
Well, there's certainly one in Kings Highway that's an extraordinary example of
Oh, the
you know,
two.
bringing the glory back
yeah,
was just
those-
absolutely wonderful.
The two corner houses,
Mhm.
Washington Street and Kings Highway.
So-
Yeah, they're wonderful examples.
So it's still in, construction
working.
form,
Working.
but at some point, I hope to work with everybody on the commission at one time or another, and Blue and Janelle have been very, very helpful in this
And
process.
so, piggybacking with that,
Mhm.
unless, are you done?
No, I'm done.
Okay, so, yeah, Deb's also had started working on a user-friendly fold-out, because we want something that's an easy takeaway. We want something that's an easy takeaway. I keep trying to look around this silly column,
You can move that closer. There you go.
and it's, so, so anyway, Deb had done, a draft or started
I
working.
would say it's a stab.
A stab, okay, it's a
Yeah.
stab of a draft. And then we agreed that maybe she should sit tight until, you know, Kevin, what's his name here? Kevin gets further into it, so we have something to work from. And so that's the big plan, is that you can come into, you walk in the door and you're trying to get information, or somebody told me I live in the historic district and I have to do what? And you can pick up the flyer, and it can also give you information on how to get to the website, and that gets you started, and anybody can pick that up. And we think that's kind of another way to make this less threatening, in a way. And Deb, did you want to add anything or say anything, or?
No, Michael and I, you know, I think this was maybe my first or second meeting, so kudos to you, Kevin, for the work you've done. But I think we envisioned this as being a bite-sized tidbit, you know, to entice people to go further and push them into going into the website and doing the research and just urging them to go further. So that makes all the sense in the world to have the document that you're working on and then pull out the pieces that are going to be most applicable for card rack, so that we can think about where we want to share those, and you know, maybe some new places that card should appear, and you know, use it as a marketing technique.
Right, and, you know, and a handout at City
Right.
Hall, of course, is a natural place where a lot of people come for a lot of information. So I don't know what the overall time frame is.
I
both
had one
of you.
comment, just
Sure.
an idea. On the handout, I was wondering if there was any thought about including, you know, a small version of the flow chart on that because I think that's so important. I know we did that. We simplified the flow charts for the land use for the subdivision, and because the procedures changed a bit, and I do think it made things much more understandable for applicants. You know, maybe this would be beneficial to have at Realtor offices.
That was my
yeah.
point, exactly.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think a follow-up to all this is, because it started out with public education. Like, they don't know what we do, or
Yeah.
why we do it, or how we base our decisions. But it gets bigger than that, and eventually it has to go back to how do we alert the public, educate them, and give them access to the information, and that's marketing.
And I liked what Janelle said, something about make it more, you know, more of a fun thing for them to go back and be exploring. Because I think people perceive that it's not really fun to sit here and do what we do. And also that these are just things I have to do, not the joy of maybe discovering the joy of restoring a home. And we just need someone from HGTV to come to Lewis, like the New Kids on the Block guy does, and have a great show, you know, about restoring homes in Lewis.
I'll call Drew and Jonathan.
You get this project done, as all this is coming together, one of our local TV station might be willing to come out and do something like that.
Oh, they were always willing.
Because Lewis is really quite unique in, you know, with all the historic renovation that's happened here. It really makes it, kind of, it's one of the major things that makes it what it is.
I think this is also, like, maybe this is where you wanna do your outreach and your workshop, because this is such a complete change from what your standards and guidelines are. It's like, we need, we're moving forward, is everybody comfortable with them? Do they make sense to the public?
Right.
You know, and
Absolutely.
Yeah,
you
well,
know,
yeah, I think that's,
looking
yeah,
at that, so you get your
because
public
that's,
feedback.
oh, definitely, because it's always surprising that, you know, you're among the same people saying the same thing to everybody, and sometimes somebody will sit down and say, but there's nothing in here about, you know, and you go, oh my God, you know, all of a sudden.
So doesn't Cape Henlopen host, maybe doesn't host, it's just the location for the renovation fair in the fall? Isn't there a,
The high school has that, yeah.
So the city's looked into that, for some outreach, and it's a little over our budget to get a table.
oh, it is?
Really? Is it pricey?
It was over $800 for a table.
Wow.
Well, you know, I was hoping, I just assumed, actually, Mike DiPaolo would be here, because when he was the director of LHS, for a couple of years, he put together building materials, and it was on the second, weekend event. And I think it was in the old library on the second floor. There was that big meeting room. And so,
Oh, yeah.
I want to talk to him, because I think that's something else we could do, and, you know.
Wouldn't a grant cover that? Could we write a grant to do that? I just think that being proactive with this new idea, instead of us, and I don't want to speak for my fellow commissioners, but I always feel like community outreach is really important, rather than, I think the signs are a really great step in the right direction, because we've uncovered that people are now aware that something's happening in their neighborhood.
Yes.
And gee, maybe I should go to the meeting. That's a great idea. But more than that, I just would like to see us have a presence and not be threatening.
Yeah,
That we're helpful, and we actually are nice people.
Yeah, and sometimes a good fun workshop can do that, and I think with the way this is going, you're turning your rules and regulations into something a little bit more user-friendly and much more fun.
And people do need to see what Kevin was mentioning, that number one, for a lot of people, is that there is a great financial value in maintaining a historic district and living within it. And getting people invested in that idea, rather than trying to spend less to, get their house
They're gonna have
up
equity
to
when they do
par.
it right.
Something you might want to consider is doing a little bit of collaboration with the Historical Society. They're doing a lot of things,
With whom, I'm sorry?
the Historical Society.
Uh-huh.
They have the campus there. They often have social things where you could put up a table and people would come over and get your brochures. I mean, they're a great organization to work with too, and they have the same interest.
Sure.
Yeah,
And
they're
to
doing a lot
answer
more.
your question, Deb, there are funds available for these kinds of things. When I was at the conference in West Palm Beach, I spoke with a couple people, and including one from SHPO, who said, there are funds available. And the other thing I think that would be really helpful is when we get through this process and it works well, which of course it will work well, and we're done with it, one of the suggestions I had gotten was share it with the other historic groups in your state. And there are funds for that. So you get a conference together, if you will, and they will fund you to help educate other historic district, other historic commissions, preservation commissions, so. But thanks, I will keep you updated.
Very good, very good. So, all right, so we touched a little bit on the grants and bylaws, procedures, guidelines, ordinance, workshop, train, a lot of these items, they all overlap. So I started a bit of a rambly list on things that have been missing from, let's see, how many are we over there? I think it was, is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6. And these are things that need to be added or corrected in our guidelines. Thank you.
50%.
So add mechanicals to the bottom of that, that we just talked about,
And exterior staircases.
and exterior staircases. So we don't have to come up with a final list, but, you know, I had been running a list, and I decided a good way to move it forward would be, and I can email this to you if you'd rather have it emailed, and then you can just add things to it as you think of them, and maybe next time we meet, we could do a little deeper dive on it, okay? And the staircases. And the other thing, and also think also about for a workshop with, you know, SHPO, CHAD, however all that comes to happen, what subjects, what, you know, things that you want to learn more about. I mean, sometimes the workshops that we get online are really great, but sometimes they're not quite exactly what we're looking for to learn more about, you know. So I think if you want to,
Sometimes the workshops aim at much larger cities.
yes,
With much
yes.
larger projects,
right,
you know.
right.
And it's nice to watch them use $17 million to restore a bank building in its extraordinary glory in Chicago, but
Yeah.
doesn't really help us in Lewis, so.
No, I think all information's good information, and you can.
It's all
you can-
helpful.
And you can always, you know, glean something from it, but, you know, sometimes it just doesn't quite make it. In the past, we've always had on file, and I've got bios from all of you right now, I think. I think I've got Deb's. No, I don't have Deb's. I can tell by the frown on her face.
Okay.
I have a bio from everybody else, I think. It's just a good idea to have those on file. It was always what the city always had, and so it's just good to continue that. So, and then we've already talked about possible workshops on tax credits, SHPO, CHAD. If you have any thoughts that you want to add to that, on workshops, whether they're in person or formal or whatever.
I think one that we might think about, and we touched on this in the last couple of months, is just climate change and
Yes.
and the vulnerability of a coastal community.
Yeah, and I did come across some things online about that. This thing's falling apart. The other thing I came across, and it was much too large, but I may send it to each of you online, and it was a project that was funded for Philadelphia, I think it was. And they went through and they evaluated infill projects that had already been done. And then they created a way to rate them as to, you know, like streetscape, you know, did it make it up or down? And it made me, when you look at that, I mean, we're not Philadelphia, and you won't see any projects that are anything like ours. But what my takeaway was that we have to kind of be more willing and adapting to infill, because you just don't want, to me, one of the exciting things about Lewis is the diversity. Any street has a lot of diversity in the size of the buildings, the design of the buildings, and we don't want that infill to be so limiting that all of a sudden it takes away from that variety of design, architecture, proportions, and things like that. And the other thing is that when you have an infill piece of infill property, an infill structure that is being proposed or wanted to be proposed, you have to think past what just happens today. I mean, you know, there's 3 lots, they're narrow, they're deep, there's 2 structures on either side, and they don't go very deep in that property, either side, the right or the left. But they could. They could have another owner that wants to double the size of the house. And so I think whatever you permit on the empty lot should not be so restricting that all of a sudden you're going to stop the next buyer on either side of the house. Because, you know, part of Lewis is fluid. I mean, it always has been. You know, your house started out very, very small. Now it's 3 times the size. Yeah, about that, yeah.
You know, and I think it's fair to say that looking at the trends, when people buy houses here, most of our applicants are increasing the size, sometimes dramatically. It's rarer to see someone who's, the one applicant that we had that just was staying in the footprint. It was like, it was so exciting to see that.
But that house was already a good size.
Yeah.
They could meet all their needs just by repurposing the interior spaces and doing modifications that were still within the footprint. Yeah.
But due to the land cost, many people still would not have done that. With the land costs so high, I think a lot of people want to maximize the value of the property sitting upon it. So, yeah, I agree that we need to, if we're looking at infill, look at what's likely going to be.
Right, you know.
I would not say let's look at what's likely going to happen, because
No, I don't mean that.
all you have to do is look down the coast and you can see what's going to happen without reining in things. I think we're pretty reasonable, and I think there have been some additions in building that the commission has approved, and because it was within reason. The standards very clearly say that, you know, you should not overwhelm the other historical structures that are around in the nature of the streetscape and all that. And I don't think money should drive it. I think that if people purposely buy in the historic district, they have to realize that there comes some responsibility with that.
100%.
And we do have some really large houses in the district, because historically they've been here and they've been large.
They were built large.
They were
some of
built
them,
large, some of them.
Yeah.
Some people had a lot of money in this town at some point. Built some pretty big places.
Yes.
But I think this is all what we do, though, is we read and we consider and we try our best to, but I think I'm not one who wants to say, we just have to give up and say in 30 years, this is all gonna be, you know, filled up. Because why have a historic district if you're gonna do that?
Yeah,
Is-
right.
The idea is to maintain some of the history, and it is a limited part of the city.
Oh, it is, it
You
is.
have to keep remembering, there's a whole part of the city that just is not in the historic district.
That's true.
It doesn't need to have the same restrictions.
That's true. But I think it's just, the reality is that we do not have any good guidelines for infill.
Right,
And-
and hopefully
and-
this will bring us some,
And
Things
the,
to
and buildable empty lots around town, I think there's still about 10 of them, something like that.
few,
That's,
yeah.
I think, what Pete said. As I said, oh, there's not many. He said, there's 10. 10. So,
A lot of houses that need work.
There's still a lot of vacant.
and then there's probably some non-contributing structures that we don't have anything in the code that would allow us to deny a demolition. But the other thing that's coming out of the updates that Chad's doing now for the National Register updates is also taking, and they've done this a couple times, but we've never responded, is a bigger look at all of Lewis, and even suggesting that Chip Carpenter Square should be its own little section of the historic district. in a few years, they'll all be contributing because of the age of the buildings. And they've also suggested to us a couple of times that we consider moving up the age of the buildings. And that's going to require a lot more conversation, because I'm of a mind that says, no matter what you do, there's always unintended consequences. And so that means some of the houses that are small little ranchers may now be contributing structure, and if anybody ever wanted to buy them and put a second floor on them, they couldn't, unless you have something in the guidelines that says you can. But, so that's a bigger decision, I think. You know. But I do think we have to start thinking about, you know, how we can't just continue to say no to infill structure when we don't have any guidelines for the owners and the applicants. I don't think that's fair.
Well, I wouldn't say we have no guidelines. It's not clear to some,
It's not clear to anybody. It's not, you know.
although it should be to some.
Well, I mean, you know, not wanting a structure that's in between two small structures to overpower, but not able to provide guidelines to an applicant on what would be acceptable. Yeah. Okay. So anybody else have anything they want to add? Larry, you're a
No.
no.
Thank you.
Tonight.
Deb?
Good,
Yeah.
thank you.
Oh, okay.
Let's keep
Would you-
moving through the agenda then.
Oh, well, I think we're about through almost. Let me see. So so I think we've talked about the ordinance, the workshops, the bylaws. I still have on here the yard signs, which I think are doing a great job. I don't know why I kept it on there. And the endangered building list, just for the heck of it, Janelle.
No update, but I think
I have a question
Sure.
about the endangered list.
Yes.
Well, I wasn't sure. I see, just in the neighborhood that I live in, there are probably 3 to 4 vacant homes that haven't been lived in for several years.
Wow.
Several years. And, you know, neighbors express concerns about them because animals are running through them and things like that. What is an endangered building, and what does the city do about it? What is the code regarding buildings that are not being lived in?
And are these homes in the historic district or Burton subdivision?
I think some of them don't even have water turned on to them.
They're Burton subdivision.
Well, they're
They're-
out in
I-
the Burton and right outside the Burton. And I
So,
was just curious, because this comes up all the time, and some of these may actually be in the historic district. I think 2 of them are. One may not be relevant because it may have been addressed years ago, but within the Burton subdivision, none of that is considered historical.
Right.
But there are, I'm sure, other houses outside of our neighborhood that sit unoccupied for many years. And I guess I'm interested in it because they could be labeled as a nuisance, yet you've got the desire to have them restored at some point, hopefully, if they last.
Well, I think whether you're in the historic district or not, you really don't want houses sitting empty and, so Janelle, you seem to be the expert on this particular issue.
so. There's no true endangered building list. It was brought up once, and it's like the city's aware of some buildings that we keep an eye on. You know, if they, because we want to make sure they don't get to demolition by neglect. So what the city can do is we can enforce the property maintenance code, which will look at all the rules and regulations to make sure that something's habitable, keeping the grass cut. We cannot force somebody to live in their house if they don't want to live there. But what we do is enforce our building codes, our existing building codes and the property maintenance code. And if you find one and you want to give us a call, we'll take care of it. We've worked with owners to get their houses repainted or fix the painting that's chipping, or if there's some cracking on windows, we work with them to try to make sure they can maintain their house. And that's what we do. And that's the authority the codes give the city and the staff to do, is try to make sure those buildings are kept in a decent manner, in a livable manner. Sometimes we do check with the BPW to see if something's been turned off or not, because then we'll keep an extra eye on those. But that's typically what we're looking at. Some of the buildings that we've been keeping an eye on have actually been in the historic district and have come through the process because they needed some TLC, and the owners are, sometimes it takes the owners some time to kind of like figure out what they want to do with it. But we do try to be in contact with owners and make sure we're trying to keep to the code.
Well, and I can see the need to maintain them in some respect as they are, because if you eliminate them, you've just possibly lost a historic structure. But the other part of that is, if they get eliminated and anyone does purchase them and then want to do a rebuild on that site, they lose their footprints. And that's very valuable when you buy a piece of property,
Yes,
the footprints.
Also, in the code, and I'm not sure it got lost in some of these changes, but Ted Becker was felt very strongly about, in the historic district, not permitting any demolition until there was an approved plan for whatever was going to happen on that property.
Okay.
And that's because it's very easy if we didn't have that, it's very possible that people would look around and say, well, this house, I don't want to touch it, I don't put any money in it, but this property could be more valuable someday. So I'll buy it up and I'll demolish the house and I'll just cut the grass, And so I think that probably happened in a couple of places, and so when we updated some of the guidelines, that was inserted. I don't know if it's still there or not. I'll have to look.
Well, I was just curious because I see this on a lot of the agendas, and this was a good explanation.
Mm-hmm.
I have one more question about it too. I realize it's a quasi list. It's a, okay, so it's not a list. But are houses watched all over the city or only in the historic district?
Oh, throughout the city.
Okay.
Oh, the
Throughout
whole
the city.
Yeah.
Because code enforcement is for throughout the city. What the department does is we're looking at houses throughout the city. And, our job is to make sure all the houses are kept in a reasonable manner. And that's what we try to do.
And I think the city turns off gas and water and things like that as soon as
City
they're.
does not.
The city does not.
That is not the city. The city has no jurisdiction over water, sewer, electric,
Or gas.
or gas. Gas is a private entity, and the utilities are subject to the Lewis Board of Public Works. So I know most cities, it would be the city, but not in Lewis, because the utilities do not fall under the city.
Yeah, but
It's a weird one.
it's a weird one.
Or
Because if there is gas or electric, or, there could be a fire, there could be flooding, there could be no heat on, so, I was under the impression previously that the city would, for safety of the public, get some of those things turned off. I won't say they turned them off, but, they somehow were for the safety of the public.
If there is a dangerous building, and if we have to condemn something or we have to do something, then of course, that's
Okay,
what the building officials have the ability to do. But it has to
Okay.
be an extreme case. We're not gonna do it because the paint's chipping.
Oh, no.
It has to, there
It's
are
usually-
criteria you have
yeah.
to meet before the city has the ability to do that. And then we'd work with the Board of Public Works to identify those items.
Yeah, and that's happened before. There was a barn on Burton Avenue that had a bunch of families of cats living in it, and I think the roof was half caved in, and I don't know, tree growing out of it or something, and it took forever and ever, you know.
And Joe now lives in that house.
He's a creative spirit. Mhm. Yeah. So,
I would like to ask one more question, since
Sure.
we're looking at all these sweeping improvements. Has there ever been discussion of adding additional properties to the historic district?
yes, there has. We have the federal district and we have the city district. And the city district includes Ship Carpenter Square. And actually, we had a conversation with Chad about that last week. Because Michael Wider brought it up because I know he and I had thought that should be one of our goals, is to make them the same, the historic and the city and the National Register. So, but what Kate told us is that, you know, we have to go through a procedure because the federal government will come back, and if we've included too many streets that don't have contributing structures on them, that they don't want more than a certain percentage of houses to be non-contributing in a historic district. And they may say, well, fine, we'll add those 2 streets, but you have to drop off this one, you know, or something like
Right.
that. You know, because several of the streets in our district, we modified the city's district just to straighten it out, because we would have, you know, 2 lots were not included on a street, and that just seemed dumb, you know, so we do the whole street. And over time, those houses will eventually be contributing. So that was interesting. I hadn't heard that before. So
Also working with the property owners.
that's true. That's true.
That's
Yes.
also a big part of it.
It's a big part of it because, yeah, when I really tried hard to get a couple of very valuable historic houses in the district, even though one of them was very isolated, but any property owner that has a historic structure that lives in the city can request
Yes.
that their property be in the district. And that also enables them to get tax credits as well, which is, you know, helpful if they're planning to do anything. Like Joe, you could ask for your house to be in the district, and the next time you want to do a renovation, you can get tax credits. Never mind.
Everyone is afraid. They don't see the benefit, and I think that the overworking, the approach and the view of HPARC maybe could help people see the benefit.
Well, the benefit is money. The benefit is you can, I remember that the fellow that lives on the corner of Second and Ship Carpenter, Bill, he was a commissioner, Bill Landon. He said he didn't pay any property tax for a couple of years because he was doing so much work, and he piecemealed it over. You get so much per year on a project.
Well, I'll give you an example of an area that would not want to be involved, and it probably would be important not to have them involved. If you look at the beach side, and you look at those little cottages over there, many of them are from the 50s, earlier. They are little historic structures.
Oh, they are.
But the value of the property that they sit on is amazing. And if you held them into that footprint, you would do some major financial damage in terms of, you know, the property values of it.
And there are homes that are quite historic down in the beach, not in the historic
East Market.
district. There are so many homes, and they're disappearing. They're disappearing.
Yeah. East Market, the residents on East Market requested to be in the historic district.
Right, which is super special.
Yeah.
You
yeah.
know, that's the thing I think is the pride of place, and
Yeah, they wanted to protect it. Yeah.
but unfortunately, we are losing many, many historic homes on the beach.
Have been for decades.
I know, and you go down, I swear it's increased. Sometimes I can't believe it when I drive down.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a property owner was concerned because his house has hardly had anything done to it, so it's really as it was. And he said, I'm really concerned. I'd like to protect the house. And I said, well, you can. You can just request that it be brought into the district. Oh, okay. Well, then that means that somebody who might want to buy it would be restricted. I said it would be protected. Well, all of a sudden, he was thinking of the money that how more valuable it might be if it could be demolished and somebody could build. So that's what happens.
So are
It's
there
all
any
about money.
Other questions about?
We can do chair and staff, I
Okay.
think. Okay. John, you're on.
Oh, that would be
Oh.
me this week.
Okay.
So we had 4 permit applications for chair and staff. The first one was 119 McFee Street. That was removal of clamshell driveway material and installation of 3/4-inch bluestone. That was approved. 118 Manilla Avenue was an 8-foot by 10-foot shed in the rear yard that could be seen from the street. That one was approved as well. 215 Monroe Avenue, replacing exterior siding and windows in the front facade. That was outside of HPARC jurisdiction. And finally, 119 Manilla Avenue, replacing existing fence with a 2/6 fence, and that was approved as well.
Can I ask on Monroe Avenue, what made that out of the jurisdiction? Was it the,
Well, originally, it was denied as submitted, but as I looked at it, I realized that if they just wanted to, instead of putting new siding that didn't match the existing siding, if they went back and tried to match the existing siding, it would be considered a repair, and then it's out of HPARC. And so that's where this stands, but now they're making additional changes, so you may see it.
Well put.
Thank you. Okay, any
Public
public comment? Anybody chomping at the bit to talk to us? Anybody even on? One.
yay,
Oh, Tim. Hi,
yeah,
Tim.
he's
Hi,
always
Tim.
there. Like a guardian angel.
Yes.
That he is.
From afar.
Okay,
I
I think
will
we're,
move that we adjourn the meeting.
all right, thank you very much, everyone.
Second.
Thank you.
Second.
Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.